Hello and welcome to the Amateur Skeptics Podcast, number 76. I'm your host, Brian. Joining me this evening, Ian.
Hello!
And Mac.
Hey, everybody.
And Kimberly.
Hello there.
And Ian, if you're going to do that again, you need to get a foot away from your microphone.
Okay, I'd be good.
Yeah, you're a little loud. How's everybody doing?
Doing great.
Yeah?
Doing all right.
I'm glad to be back. Survived the Mayan apocalypse.
Worst
Brand new
apocalypse
year.
ever.
Lucky 13.
Yeah. Yeah, the apocalypse was a big bust.
Worst apocalypse ever.
Exactly. I did go to the Mayan Survivor Party up in Colorado Springs. I ended up actually talking to is she a psychiatrist, psychologist up there? She was part of the free thought community. She was great. I spent quite a bit of time talking to her, talked to some other people, saw Michael up there, who I thought was going to join us tonight, but is nowhere to be found, but that's okay. So that was fun. We drove up there, had a couple of drinks. Yeah.
Were there any new Mayan apocalypse rituals or anything like that?
No.
Or just drinking?
No. You know that they didn't even air grievances.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. I thought that was something you did for everything now. I mean, at least around, the holidays, you should always air grievances. That's probably the best part of the Festivus party, is the airing of the grievances. That was a lot of fun. That and Rich using a bullhorn inside his house. I think that was somebody's grievance. All right, let's have the announcements.
Okay, great. So we've got some fun stuff coming up. Denver just keeps seeming to get more organized. We're going to be having a meeting on Saturday, January 12th at 2 p.m. It will apparently conflict with some kind of football or soccer game. I don't know, whatever the Broncos play, playing on the 12th, and so no one's going to go to this thing. But that's okay. We'll get started with the people who aren't addicted to football. And basically the idea is the FFRF, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, we want to set up a Denver chapter. So
that would be cool.
We're going to look into that on the 12th.
I am a member of FFRF. I joined them this year.
Good. Well, if you can make it, apparently to create a chapter, we need 10 dues-paying members.
Well,
you don't have to be a member to come to the organization meeting. You can just come and learn more. But we do need some people, so if you are, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll do that. I pay dues. I'll come and help you out.
All right. On Sunday the 13th, the Humanists of Colorado are having their regular monthly meeting. This month, we're having Marvin Strauss, who he did a speech at the AAA convention back in September, but it was in a different building, and it was against a bunch of other really great speeches, and I think was kind of poorly attended, unfortunately. So he's going to be doing that same presentation he did for the conference on Sunday at we start at 6 with a potluck, and then 7 o'clock is the presentation. The Boulder Atheists are doing another one of their atheist classrooms on Wednesday, January 16th. This one on the love of science and nature. The Free Thought Exchange, which is going through some very interesting stuff right now. They just opened a chapter out in Orlando, and apparently were featured on a Thinking Atheist video. So they're getting a lot of attention right now, and a lot of people are really interested in it. But we're going to be doing West Bowles Community Church on Thursday, January 24th. And then what I'm super, super excited about and been working really hard on is the Secular Hub that I've talked about before is finally going to be opening its doors. We've rented a place. The lease started on January 1st. We're at 31st and Downing, and we are going to have our grand opening coinciding with Darwin Day on February 12th. That's a Tuesday. And I just talked today with James DeGregory, who runs CERT, which is the Colorado Evolution Response Team. They're basically a group of scientists who, when people basically start wanting to talk creationism and taking evolution out of the curriculum, go in with the facts and figures and good speeches and stuff like that.
I didn't realize that
we're
they
really
were
excited to have him be our first official speaker.
Are they local?
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
In town. I think he's at DU.
Okay.
I could have that wrong. He might be at a different one.
I've read stuff from them on the web, but I didn't realize that they were local.
Yeah, that C is Colorado.
That's cool. Okay.
Yeah, they're awesome. I've seen him present before. I'm really excited to hear him again. And Darwin Day is always a lot of fun. Also coming up on Saturday, February 23rd, the Fort Collins Skepticamp, I guess, is happening, at Mulligan's. Is that right? I haven't looked into it yet, to be honest.
So actually, isn't Mulligan's the pub?
Mulligan's Pub. That's what.
That's where they're going to have the actual Skeptic Camp?
Yep.
Okay, well that's good with me. And then there's also some planning going on for Skeptic Camp Denver, which I guess will be on April 27th. So you can go to the Skeptic Camp wiki and get more information on both of those. And that's your announcements for today.
All right. Very good. So, well, we actually have science stuff today. So we're going to start with anti-GMO movement creator has regrets.
Yeah, I caught this just off of, I think I followed somebody else's blog or something like that. And this I thought was just really interesting for two reasons. One, I honestly don't know all that much about GMOs, which stands for genetically modified organisms?
Organisms.
I guess.
Organisms, yeah.
Yeah.
It's organisms.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's mostly about food. And these days, GMOs are a huge business. They're selling billions and billions of dollars. And these are genetically modified in a lab. They basically get these seeds that produce more food faster with more resistance, I guess, to bugs, less vulnerability to pest infestation, stuff like that. And they're being used around the world to feed our population. A lot of people have a real problem with this. Since the 90s, there's been a big movement that's very anti-GMO, that it's poison, we shouldn't be messing around with the genetics of the food we eat. People are calling for natural and organic foods and stuff like that. So I've always kind of been like, I don't really know. I don't go for the organic stuff. I don't really know too much about it. But this article that we've got linked here is talking about the guy who kind of created the movement back in the mid-90s, or one of the guys. His name is Mark Linus, and he apparently did a bunch of research and found out that according to every test that we can do, GMO foods are not any more dangerous than any other kind of food. Again, this has all sorts of caveats on it. Of course, anytime you're raising food, you have the chance of, we've seen organic food and stuff being bad for you, specific batch of stuff. But there's nothing that actually goes into the genetic manipulation of these plants that causes the problem. And so he came back out and I thought very bravely said, I looked at the science and I apologize. I was wrong. Really did a big 180 on it. So,
Yeah.
Of course, here at the Amateur Skeptics, we always like people who can do the research and recognize what the conclusions are, even if they're not what you were looking for.
Right, but a lot of times with these kinds of things, the harm is already done. Because, even now, I mean, it's like with the anti-vax stuff. Mm-hmm. Everybody's come out, the vaccines are safe, but we have, these pockets of people who don't believe it. And this is going to be the same way. But, some of the, it's like some of the issues that they have are valid concerns. Because we have people modifying seeds that have to repurchase seeds every year, and they can't collect seeds and replant them. And so some of that is because of the way that they're engineered, and some of it's because of the way that they license them, because they can license a seed different if it's a natural seed versus a modified seed. But a lot of this is funny because we don't eat a single vegetable that isn't genetically modified.
Right.
I mean,
I put that on my Facebook post and said the same kind of thing. I mean, since the beginning of time, we've been hybridizing plants in all farming. I mean, that's basically almost the definition of farming, which is genetic manipulation.
Right. It's funny because, it's like, give me a GMO-free banana.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's a very vague term.
Well, it is. Now, when they say GMOs, they are specifically talking about laboratory GMOs. Stuff that's being done in the lab. And there are things that we need to be concerned about. One of the ones I heard about, they took proteins from a Brazil nut, and I think that they put them into soy. And one of the issues that they had was that if you were allergic to Brazil nuts, you would be allergic to that soybean.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, so there's certain allergies. Well, but you don't know that. What are you allergic to in the peanut? Is it the protein? Is it this or is it that? So, I mean, because one of the things they might be able to do with GMOs is make a peanut that people aren't allergic to. But if it's the protein, probably not. I don't even know if somebody's trying to do that. It just occurred to me that might be a good thing. But I think their concerns might be valid and should be addressed. The other concern they have is that if you have a GMO crop, you have to put a bumper crop before you do another crop because of cross-pollination. You want to be careful about cross-pollination with different plants. And there's different reasons for that. One is because you don't know what that might produce. The other is that, particularly with organic stuff, they're trying to keep their lines as pure as possible. I remember when I worked at the greenhouse, we had some sort of a brandy wine tomato that they had done their best to never multiply or
cross-pollinate?
Cross-pollinate with any other plant. And it's like, well, okay. I mean, if it produces a better, more tasty tomato, go for it. But if it's no better than any other tomato, who cares? So I think that the scare is probably overdone, but I think that there are some concerns that need to be addressed. The other thing is that, each GMO would have to be addressed individually.
Right.
You can't just lump all GMOs into the same category because they're all doing different things. So,
and here's another thought too. It's possible that when this guy started his anti-GMO movement, it's possible that at the time it was wise because it's still a relatively young science. We're better at it now than we were back then.
Well,
back then there could have been a lot more mistakes made.
Well, what do you mean back then? I mean, it's new in the laboratory, but we've been doing it for thousands of years.
Okay, but as far as a laboratory science goes, genetically modifying things was a young science back then.
We've never been able to specifically
target.
There were
missteps that could be made.
Sure, absolutely. And we're targeting individual genes. Well, you can't do that when you're crossing two plants in the field. You cross them and you see what happens, right? But in a laboratory, we can do things a little bit more precise. And certainly you could cross something that could create something poisonous or, so each one really needs to be evaluated in and of itself. So the problem is that...
And I do think that's part of what happens with the Food and Drug Administration, right?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how much input that there is going on there, but you would think there's an issue between, getting something, and making a profit out of it, and how long is it going to take it to go through the Drug and Food Administration before they can actually go and plant it? I don't know. You would think that there would be a certain amount of time that you would want to investigate the crop before you declare it safe, much like you would any new drug, right? It would have to go through certain trials. So it could get expensive. But I bet it doesn't happen. We see new fruits all the time that they cross. I mean, how many apple strains are there now? I bet you not each one of those is being certified.
Well, it depends on how heavy the barrel of apples the person is lifting is, as to how many apple strains there are.
Yeah, I just hope that it doesn't turn around and next week we find out that this dude is on some GMO payroll and he's just a shill.
Sure.
I hope it was legit. I checked the science. I was wrong. Mea culpa. I hope it was legit.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, if that's what it turns out to be, though, we'll report it at that time.
Yeah.
All right, Ian. Why do I have to stop beating my kids?
Well, according to this article in Psychology Today by, Molly Castellio, PhD, some recent studies have shown that spanking your kids can actually decrease their IQ and interfere with the brain's gray matter.
So you really are beating the stupid into them instead of out of them.
Apparently.
Yeah, that's basically what it's saying. I think if this happens, I think you're swinging way too high.
Yeah, it is kind of an interesting claim that by spanking them, you're reducing gray matter in the brain.
Well, it goes into talking about the link, because it is part of the nervous system and everything.
Right.
And where was it? I'm trying to remember. There was an area where it actually got into exactly how they think it does it, but I'm not finding it now.
Yeah.
Well, now, in the article, it's talking about supporting the hypothesis that children and adolescents subjected to child abuse and neglect have less gray matter than children who have not been ill-treated. Okay? The question I think we need to look at is spanking actually child abuse?
Well, and that's an interesting question. And Sweden outlawed spanking in 1979. And there is a big question as to whether it's child abuse. I
can tell you, my two boys don't get spanked, and we are constantly complimented on how well behaved they are. So, the idea that, I've seen the debate, I've looked over stuff, and a lot of people claim, kids that don't get spanked are out of control. My boys are not out of control. They're very well behaved, never been spanked. The main punishment is they get sent to their room, and that does affect them. And, we don't, the room places with...
I've seen their rooms. They might never find their way back out.
Okay,
But,
here's the thing. I have spanked the girls, but I don't do it regularly. There had just been times, but every time, I really can't wail on them, and I feel bad about it, and it really doesn't change their behavior. And this article says the exact same things. And I feel like if I resort to that, I have failed as a parent. Because we should have better tools for dealing with this stuff. And their suggestions are send them to the room. We don't spank the girls. Like I say, I have. They've been spanked, but it's not helpful. Maybe if I did it more often, it would be more effective.
I was trying to find an article I read a few years ago talking about how there are no violent criminals in the prison system who have not at the minimum been spanked. Basically, if they're a violent criminal, they were at least spanked. If according to that, kids that weren't spanked do not become violent criminals, and that actually makes sense to me. Because
how many kids that were spanked don't become violent criminals though?
But if the minimum thing for becoming a violent criminal is being spanked, that does say something about how, well, if they're not being spanked and they are not going to become violent criminals, there's a connection there.
I would severely question that. I really like to see that.
I wish I found it. I've been looking for it. I remember reading it a few years back. It was after a video got released of some girl really beating the crap out of some other kids. And I got into a blog thing that was saying, oh, well, that girl should have been spanked. I'm like, where are you getting that from? There's no logic to saying that girl's violent just because she wasn't spanked. And I went and I found this article and I showed it to her.
I'd be interested to say that. I would believe that of women before I believe that of men. And maybe that's just me being a sexist, but men do tend to be more violent than women. And so if you told me that women that don't get spanked don't become violent criminals, I might believe you. But if you want to tell me that the same is true of men, you're going to have to show me.
I was trying to find the article. I couldn't find it somewhere out there. Something along the lines of violent criminals have been spanked or something like that. But I remember it was interesting because it showed the statistics on the level of abuse, starting at spanking all the way up to, seriously abused, and how that affects how violent criminals become. And it showed a correlation between the two. The more they were abused as a kid, the more violent they become, and the minimum was spanking.
Well, when they're talking about spanking in these studies, how much were these kids being spanked? Was it the occasional, swat on the ass, or was it like it's like, well, you didn't do your homework again, bend over?
Yeah, well, you hear stories. My wife will tell me stories about her family. There were a lot of spanking in there, and that I don't think really did any good if you know about her cousins and stuff, and a lot of the stuff that went on there.
Okay.
I don't know that spanking does any good, but I'm also wondering how much spanking are we talking about to reduce gray matter? We're not talking about the occasional spanking then. We're talking about people who regularly spank their kids as corporal punishment, right?
I think I agree with you.
I just don't know what's going on here. I doubt that I have scarred my kids for life by the one or two times that I have.
No, you've scarred your girls for life in all sorts of other ways.
Right, yeah, no, there's plenty of other stuff that I've done to scar them. I don't think that spanking is responsible for them.
But, there's a level of, within parenting having controls. Because I do love it talks about here that if they do that, a parent should explain calmly why they did it. The specific behavior that promoted, make sure they understand the cause and effect of it. Not just, oh, you did something wrong, here's a spanking, I'll go and think about it. Because kids don't necessarily think about it. I've dealt that with mine. Every time my kids ever get punished, afterwards I take them aside and say, listen, do you understand why we did that? Tell me you understand. Make sure you understand what it was that got you into that position you did not like. So that you understand that's not, the behavior that's acceptable. And I think often with spanking, from what I've seen, there's not that next step. You spank and say, okay, that'll teach you, and let it go. And it's like, well, that's not teaching them anything. That's the one thing with me. I communicate with my boys. They know why they're in trouble. They know what they did that got me upset. And, I will sit there and I will bug them like crazy until they are communicating to me that, okay, yes, I understand. I think that's worse punishment for them than spanking, is listening to me talk to them.
It probably is. It's hurting me.
Oh, you went there.
I did. I went there. Yeah.
So we have a thing that just, the statistics on spanking, in case anyone's interested in reading it. It does mention the stuff Brian talked about.
Yeah.
But it mentions the emotional stuff to it, and It talks about 100 studies, over 100 studies combined, and the general thing is that many emotional and social problems, low IQs, increased aggressiveness, and such seem to have been linked to spanking.
Yeah,
I think that this calls for experimentation. I think we need to find out exactly how much spanking is required to reduce the gray matter by how much of a percent.
Well, that is one of the questions I actually have is,
I think
what are we talking about here?
I think we're looking for extensive laboratory spanking experiments.
Yeah, that might fall into that weird moral area that science isn't supposed to cross, and they get in a little bit of trouble when they do.
Science is beyond morality. Damn it.
All right. Well, I don't necessarily disagree with their findings, but I do wonder how much spanking we're talking about. I mean,
yeah.
I would really like to know. It just seems a little extreme. I have questions.
Questions are good.
All right.
And how much help has it been? Like, we didn't have timeouts in my house when I was growing up. I can't imagine them being as effective as my mother scaring the living crap out of me.
Well, yeah.
Actually, the most effective punishment I remember, I'm not going to go into the details on it, but I basically really upset my father, and he was withdrawn from me for a while. And, you could feel the disconnect because he didn't quite know what to do with me. I had crossed some lines, and it took a while to rebuild some of that. And that was the worst punishment I remember. That's what stuck in my head the most. Was physical stuff wouldn't have done that to me. It was the fact that he was trying to figure out what was going on and what to do, and there was definitely something there. It didn't have to touch me once. It was I could physically, mentally tell that we were just there was something going on between us. And I knew what I had done to do it. So. Well,
there you go. Yeah,
Brian, you say you've got questions. Let me ask you. Is that Ask a Ninja site still up?
Yeah, right. That would be a good one.
You have questions. Ninja have answers.
All right. Let's move on. I want to talk about the Platinum-22 gas saver.
So you gotta do it more dramatically.
Oh, yeah.
Platinum-22.
Platinum-22 gas saver can increase your car's efficiency up to 22%. So I listened to this,
Test data.
I'm sorry?
Research by the champion Spark Plug.
Hold on.
Have taught us.
I hit the link. There we go.
Yeah, if you hit the link, he's going to talk to you.
Yes.
And Michael has just come on. Say hi, Michael. Or don't.
Hello, Hello, Michael.
All right, so I listened to a paranormal show called The Paracast on the GCN network, and they have a lot of advertisements, and most of the products are complete and total bunk. But this one caught my eye for a couple of reasons, mainly because they said that the federal government said that it worked. I'm thinking, well, now that's interesting, because as far as I know, they haven't endorsed any gas-saving devices. And it's right there on the front there. It says U.S. government tests confirm that the Robinson engine head, whatever, 40% more miles per gallon. That's huge. 48%. And they claimed that it was, that the agency was the Federal Consumer Protection Agency. So I thought, well, I should look into that. So they make a bunch of claims. But
I don't believe I've ever heard of a Federal Consumer Protection Agency.
Shh, we'll get there.
Okay.
You're giving it all away. Let's see. So let me see what they claim better gas efficiency. They said that they're going to increase the miles per gallon, lower the emissions, substantially reduce carbon buildup within the engine, increase the lifespan of the engine, 22% fuel savings, cost less than a catalytic converter. Which is true. Most catalytic converters are more expensive than this device.
Okay.
But you've only got to buy a catalytic converter once. This you have to buy their cartridges of their fuel additive that go into their through their special device. The other claim that they make, they say in this video is that your vehicle is only burning 60% of the gas that you put into it. So the other 32% supposedly are getting burned up by the catalytic converter, which I also thought was interesting because number one, that seems highly inefficient. If you're not even burning all the gas. So I found this article that on a government site that says fuel economy, where energy goes. And I did not realize just how you lose about 70 to 72% of the energy that the engine is creating through heat. Thermals such as radiator, exhaust, heat, combustion, pumping, and friction. So right off the bat, you're losing 70 to 72%. And that's the combined. I guess, so city is 74 to 75, and highway you get 60 to 65. So an engine is going to be about 14 to 20% of the energy it's creating is actually going to be going to the wheels to create motion. All the rest of it is getting lost. I was a little surprised by just how high that was. I didn't realize just how much energy we were losing in that transference.
That seems very surprising.
Yeah, but these numbers were put together from an EPA report. And that's going to vary, of course, depending on your vehicle, what kind of gas you can use, because there's different compression ratings for engines. And then there's also the fuel to air mixture for the combustion engine to guarantee that you're burning up all the fuel. So that was kind of the first thing that I started looking at. And you need a 14.7 to 1 ratio of oxygen to fuel to efficiently burn all of the fuel in the cylinder. So that's what they're supposed to be doing, because the idea is to burn all of the gas that the engine is taking in. And then, but there is some that gets exhausted, and that goes into the catalytic converter to get burned up before it goes to exhaust. But I couldn't really find anywhere. I mean, the idea is if you're getting this ratio, you should actually be burning all of the fuel. So I don't know where this 68 number they're talking about comes from. I don't know if it's as the vehicle ages, older vehicles on the road, if it's an average of some sort, because they don't source anything. They make a whole bunch of claims, and there's never a single source. If you look at the front of their site, the first thing is from this rebutter, and and I looked at this, and this is where, they claim the government agency, but even in this, they're not specific about the agency. And then when you look below it, there's a quote from MSNBC, but it doesn't say who the author was. It doesn't say when it was published. It doesn't say anything about it. So I tried to look through MSNBC's archives and stuff online and find this. I cannot find it. But it does say in here that the Robinson's engine head gets its final EPA testing data, and expects to launch in spring 2011. But I can't find this article anywhere. The EPA did test it. It has been, the other thing on the site is that there's no independent, there's a lot of anecdotes, people writing in claiming that they got all this gas savings and stuff, and you don't know where any of that came from. You don't know if any of that is legitimate. It does look like.
You don't know if any of it's placebo effect either.
Well, exactly. But this is one where it's easy enough to get hard numbers. I mean, at least within 22%, you should be able to figure out if you're actually getting 48% more miles a gallon. But you're right, but a lot of it probably is placebo because people actually probably are not keeping the numbers. But that's one thing about the site is that they don't source anything. They make claim after claim after claim, like this government claim, which you would think that would be, okay, well, that's a slam dunk. Let's see that report. Well, they don't link to it. All this is that they're linking to is from a press release, but it doesn't actually say where the press release came from. It doesn't say the government agency. I mean, it just says.
So it's part of what they're saying. Much of what they're saying is a rehashed, repackaged version of the HHO scam that we've seen in the past few years, where units are being sold that you're supposed to stick inside your car, and they purport to be creating hydrogen to be added to the chamber so that you can increase the amount of fuel burned. And many of the numbers that they use in that scam are now being used in the scam that you just said.
Okay, and that may be where
I've met a YouTube user named HHO Info who basically spends all his time debunking that myth. And much of what is being said about Platinum-22 is exactly what was being said about the HHO units.
Okay, and now this company has been around for 30 years. They've been selling the product for a long time, which was interesting. And there was actually back in, I think it was 1998, that I guess it was the Federal Postal Service tried to shut them down for making claims, and they lost for whatever reason. And I couldn't find the actual brief from that lawsuit, but the government lost that lawsuit for some reason, and I don't know why. And so they've used that as a springboard to say, listen, they tried to sue us and shut us down, but guess what? They couldn't because we're so fantastic. Our product works. And so they took that winning of that court case, and they used that to basically say that their product works. The government couldn't sue them, couldn't get rid of them.
It's very reminiscent of Gary Trudeau when he came out with a book called Secrets the Government Doesn't Want You to Know, just because he was sued about his first book, which had a whole bunch of home remedies, and then he went off the deep end, and he used the government losing a court case to bolster his book sales.
You mean Kevin Trudeau, right?
I was going to say Gary Trudeau or Kevin Trudeau. Gary Trudeau was the guy who did Doonesbury.
Right. I think you mean Kevin Trudeau.
Yes.
Yeah, the guy the only one that the FCC has ever taken off of television. Banned.
I like this article here, the News Channel 5 investigation of it. I'm looking at this. It's talking about the fact that Canada and the state of Texas both fined Joel Robinson.
Right. They find so they have lost some lawsuits now. So there's earlier lawsuit I think made, I wish I could find out why they lost that lawsuit. Because I think that they found a loophole. But they are making blunt, outright claims that are not true as far as I can tell. From independent testing, so the News 5, they tested it. They got no improvement. Consumer Reports tested it. And we got no improvement. And the EPA tested it with 3 different vehicles for a minimum of 2,000 miles and found no improvement. No significant improvement. So, whatever that means. Like you were saying, this Federal Consumer Protection Agency that they're claiming has endorsed their product doesn't exist. And it's interesting because even, you go through this press release that they're claiming that the government tested it, U.S. government testing officials, known as the EPA. So it is in here that the EPA tested it and found that the product worked. Well, they found no significant improvement according to the EPA report that I looked at. They have submitted it twice. The EPA, as far as I know, has tested it twice. The EPA has some sort of mandate that they have to test the claims of all of these products. As to this date, they have yet to find one that actually works. Yeah, so ultimately, and who else? And the other one that actually tested it was Consumer Reports also said that in their test it didn't work. So every independent agency that has tested it has found no improvement. Only the company's own testing has found any improvement whatsoever, which I find suspicious.
I find convenient.
Well, it's quite convenient, but I don't understand because it seems like they're making direct claims that are testable and should be able to. They should have to remove these claims, shouldn't they? And like you were saying, the Channel 5 report claim says that they have been sued by somewhere in Canada and by Texas.
Texas and Canada.
Yeah.
State of Texas fined them $10,000. Canada fined them $100,000.
Right, but they're still doing it. The fines were not enough. So it's interesting. It seems like there should be a way. I mean, do we not have a government agency that can go and tell these people you have to stop making these claims? They have something like that in Australia. So
I think a lot of it just has to do with just exactly how they say it. I mean,
Yeah.
There's, I think, a lot of ways to get around these things. And they shouldn't, but I think that's what really happens there.
Yeah, so ultimately what I found in my research is that the claim of 22% increase in efficiency is probably unlikely, but I couldn't verify it for sure, but the idea that 32% of the fuel that you put into your combustion engine just isn't getting burned seems unlikely, but it's not completely impossible, right? But I don't know where they came up with those numbers, and I couldn't find anything to confirm it. And from what I can tell by reading, I put a lot of stuff in there because I was reading about, the efficiency of combustion engines and different stuff like that. If the air to fuel mixture is 14.7 to 1, you should be burning all of the fuel. But that's not to say that it is, and there's always a chance that the EPA report was looking at older vehicles that were not tuned properly and had lost compression and different things like that could cause that fuel to not get burned. But in a new combustion engine, I would doubt that is true. But like I say, they don't source it, they just say it, so I have no way. I mean, basically they don't back it up. They don't back up anything they say. Ready to move on?
Yep.
I guess so.
Sure.
Yeah.
I gotta say, when I was reading through the articles today, I was really disappointed as we went through, because I did get all suckered in on the, wow, 22% better gas mileage. I totally want to buy
48% better gas mileage.
Yeah, 22% more efficiency, 48% more gas
But I think
mileage.
it's just like dieting. I mean, you just keep hoping for one of those magic pills, but at the end of all these articles, it came back to, drive slower, make sure your air pressure's right.
Right.
Just like dieting, right? Eat better, get more exercise. Like, where's the magic pill? That's what I want.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I hate when the stories like this lead to, like, did you know that GM has a engine that'll get 200 miles per gallon, but they're keeping it under wraps? Stories like that.
Yeah.
The inventor was killed, so he would be silenced.
Yeah, right. They locked
that's actually a really good way to silence somebody, as it turns out.
Well, they say, but it harkens back to the same kind of things that they say about Tesla, that he invented all of these things, and that he made all these claims about free energy, which he didn't. But the government doesn't want you to know, so they locked them all up. I mean, it's the same kind of conspiracy nonsense. And the other thing that the other real big question I had is, why the heck would adding platinum to my fuel make it burn better? I don't get that at all. Why is adding adding metal, in any way going to help it burn better? And how's that going to reduce carbon?
I think it's homeopathic in nature.
It might be.
They used to have lead in gasoline, but that lead in the gasoline was to help keep the seals in the engine soft.
Right, but when we moved to hardened seals,
it didn't have anything to do with the fuel burning.
Right, but when the newer engines have the hardened seals and valves, and that's not necessary anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So are you thinking that they're making the same assumption that the platinum?
I'm thinking that they're making a connection to the lead in the fuel in people's minds, but not a scientific one.
Right.
I'm thinking that they're implying that platinum is better than lead.
Right. Okay. I can see where they would try to make that connection.
And besides which, people don't know that much about platinum. It's a rare and mysterious element. It probably does a lot of things that people don't know about because it's rare and mysterious.
Right. Who put the one up here about the Mythbusters episode 53? I know that they tested a lot of these, but I'm not sure that they tested the Platinum-22.
No, they tested quite a few different methods of trying to boost your efficiency. And what they noted in the show was that the EPA had tested 104 different fuel efficiency devices, and only 7 showed improvement, and none of them showed more than a 6% improvement. So this Platinum-22 claiming 22% is far beyond any fuel efficiency improvement of any other device.
Even 6% would be good, but where's that efficiency coming from? I guess I would also wonder, are they able to, are they really... because I guess you can get more efficiency out of your engine by adding a turbo and putting more air into it.
Yeah, and just having a really well-built carburetor.
Right. Those things. Well, but nothing has a carburetor anymore. That's all electronic now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fuel injection.
Fuel injection, yeah. Yeah, so we've done a lot of stuff there was probably a time, I'll bet carburetor engines didn't burn as much. I know they didn't burn as much fuel. As much of the fuel as our new fuel injection does and stuff like that. So I imagine that some of the fuel is not getting burned. I just have a hard time with the 32% number. It seems like a lot of fuel going into that catalytic converter to get burned. Anybody else?
Well,
I honestly don't know.
A little bit better of a scam than saying that fuel line magnets are going to align the molecules so that they'll burn better.
Okay. It's a way better scam than that. Let's move on and finish up with creation textbooks.
Well, the article is simply titled, Creation Textbooks Are Garbage. Creation Textbooks Are Garbage. Creation Textbooks Are Garbage.
But how can that be?
And it shows a page from a creation textbook. I'll read it straight out to you. 3 foundational propositions. God created all things. I'm not quite sure what that has to do with to me it was kind of weird that they say 3 foundation propositions, then put straight out God created all things, then get into explaining what the 3 propositions are. But according to this, only 3 explanations can be given for the existence of all matter. These are summarized in the following. Number 1, God created it, which is creationism. Number 2, it evolved from nothing, which they call atheistic evolutionism. And number 3, God created the first matter and set it in motion, forces that caused it to evolve to its current state. And that is theistic.
Theistic evolutionism.
Evolution.
So I do take exception to number 2, that the matter evolved from nothing. That's not quite what Lawrence Krauss is saying.
Yeah, well that's the thing. The questions get really interesting. Okay, so they give you that and then they go into your textbook style questions. What is obviously wrong with the statement of atheistic evolutionism, i.e. that all matter evolved from nothing?
Oh my God. That is so awesome.
And so they give you blanks to fill that, and then it goes, because this theory is so obviously ridiculous and unscientific, most honest, they actually have honest italicized or emphasize it, most honest scientists have been forced to embrace theistic evolutionism.
That's so horrifying.
Which we all know is extremely inaccurate. Then, read 2, Peter 3:5. According to this verse, how did the earth come into being? Gives you some blanks. Then, how does God describe those who reject creationism? Give you some more blanks. Then it follows up, God is saying, although scientists know they are wrong, they refuse to admit it. Why will they purposely reject a fact, creation, they know is, and then obviously that's the end of the page.
Right.
So it's one of those things where there's no room at all here for actual thinking. One of the comments below talked about how there was a quote from, what is it? What is the point of a test? What is the point of a test that tells you what to write in the blanks? And this is from Cory Doctorow.
Cory Doctorow, yeah. Cory Doctorow is pretty funny. He's a pretty awesome guy.
Yeah, he's a great writer. I'm surprised you haven't heard of him, Ian. You'd like him.
Yeah, you would like him.
I'll have to check him out. But you could see that. I see what you're saying. It's like they're given these questions, but they're not being told to actually think about the answers. They're being told these are the answers.
Well, because the answers are fact.
Yeah, it's...
And facts are not something you have to think about. Facts are simply something that you're told.
Yeah. Now, you can go down and look at some of the comments, and there's one from a disclaimer. I'm a Christian who studies the Bible in Greek and Hebrew, preacher, teacher, lecturer. And even I think this textbook is a complete farce. What shocks me is that 2 Peter 3:5 has nothing to do with the topic. Not only is this crap pseudoscience, it's also crap pseudo-Christianity. If you cannot teach science properly, don't think you're suddenly qualified to teach theology. Both require critical thinking. If you fail at one, you've already failed at the other. We
should read 2 Peter 3:5. I don't even know that. I can't tell you that one offhand.
We all have computers. It should take us about 5 seconds to find it.
Yeah, because I was surprised because I'm like, well, that's really a Genesis thing. I didn't think Peter.
I don't think Peter touched upon that at all.
No,
but I'm no expert.
For this, they willingly are ignorant of that the word of God, the heavens were of the old, and the earth stands out of the water and in the water.
It's probably referring to. I don't think it sounds like it's just calling scientists ignorant because
well, it's not even doing that. Because
it has nothing with how the Earth came into being.
Well, to really understand what they're talking about, you would have to probably read Peter 3:1 through 5 first.
No, wait. That would be in context.
Right, exactly. Okay,
and that doesn't serve this particular exercise at all.
But this, in and of itself...
We don't want things in context.
But there is no context here at all.
That's exactly the point.
Here, let's see.
There's no context.
Oh, wait, can I get this to read it to me? Here, hold on.
2 Peter 3. This second epistle, beloved, I now write unto you, in both which I stir up your pure minds by way of remembrance, that ye may be mindful of the words which were spoken before by the holy prophets, and of the commandment of us the apostles.
Well, that's enough of that. Hey, this is BibleGateway.com. This is fantastic. All right. Well, if you take Peter 2:3-5, there is no context in which to understand it. And if you want to say that, that scientists are being ignorant, if you want to interpret they being scientists are ignorant of the Word of God, the heavens are old. Yeah, sure. They're right. We're wrong.
But it actually is kind of scary. This is the kind of thing that people are raised with and believe. And it goes with the, what's his face in Texas that said, we don't want to teach our kids critical thinking skills.
Oh, that was the GOP platform that said that.
Yeah. I mean, this one page clearly says we're not going to try and teach our kids how to think outside the box we want to confine them to. And it is a mentality that's out there. And in this podcast, we've shown how it causes more problems than anything.
Well,
it is dangerous. It is.
Not more than anything, maybe. That might be a little stretch, but yes, these kinds of things particularly are problematic. The other big issue here is that they're not attacking college institutions. They're specifically going after high school institutions, and they seem to miss the fact that this stuff trickles down. The research is happening at the college level and the research level, and then it trickles down to the high schools and the junior high and that. So if they really want to prove that this is science, they have to do this at the academic level in order for it to be accepted.
The point here is that they want this to happen at the high school level because high school you have to go to. College is a choice.
Well, they want it to happen at the high school level because it's an easier in for them because they don't have to prove anything. They actually have to prove themselves at the academic level. That's why. Which I don't think that they can do. Maybe they can. Let them try. I'm getting
my point here is that it's a difference between a captive audience and forced indoctrination versus people who are there by choice and can listen to what they want to listen to and take what classes they want to take.
Right. I think it has more to do with the fact that they cannot. It isn't going to hold up at the academic level, so they're trying to avoid it.
That could be likely.
Yeah, instead of doing it properly, they're trying to do it the easy way.
But of course, like many others, they're mixing the Big Bang Theory and evolution together, which I remember on one blog site, this guy actually said something about Darwin's theory of Big Bang. And we're like, no, Darwin had nothing to do with the Big Bang.
Right.
And that's one of the things they're doing right here. They're mixing evolution and the Big Bang Theory. Because the existence of matter has nothing to do with evolution. Those are two separate things, and they've merged them.
It is funny. I listened to one of the theistic podcasts that I listened to was talking about atheists and how if you even say anything about Darwin that they, it's like, okay, not one that's actually educated about evolution would probably not get that upset. I mean, Darwin, it can be questioned. And he's wrong on many, many things. They have this, they're constantly setting up straw mans for themselves is what's happening. And this textbook is probably never going to be found in a school. This is probably for homeschoolers, isn't it?
Yeah, this is homeschool crap.
Yeah. What kills me is that if you do homeschooling, at some point, don't you actually have to be tested to find out what you know?
I don't know enough about homeschooling. Oh. You would think there'd be some sort of testing done outside of the home environment.
I just heard that varies.
Yeah.
It seems to me that homeschooling should have some way to be accountable and that there should be some tests that they take to show what knowledge they have.
Yeah, but then you would be basing that on the assumption that the idea is to teach kids and it's really to shut parents up.
I believe that in many cases that is true, but I think that there are some good homeschoolers out there too.
Do you really?
I do. I think that there's different reasons for homeschooling. I think that people who do it that live in cities like ours is because they want to control the information. But rural kids might be doing homeschooling because it's hard to get to a facility. And so I think it depends on the reason that people are being homeschooled. I think that there are some better homeschools. I don't think that
There could be some legitimate things, but I would always, my assumption, and this is an assumption, it's not tested or anything, or feeling, is that there is so much more to school than learning.
Absolutely.
In fact, the learning part is kind of almost the smallest part. It's about social interaction. It's about learning social cues, and you'll never do that in your basement.
Well, the other problem with homeschooling, I think that you can do it at an elementary level pretty successfully, but as you get into junior high and high school, that material gets more and more sophisticated, and the idea that even me as a parent, that I would be able to teach every single piece of that curriculum at an adequate level is unrealistic. So, I mean, that's why we have teachers that specialize in their different things so they can teach that well. So I think that it's going to suffer there, and particularly in junior high and high school, those social interactions, and maybe even in elementary school, are so important.
I think so.
Yeah,
and I just don't think you get the same thing on play dates and other crap like that.
Right.
And again, this is my own personal opinion. I don't have anything backing it up, but I just don't see how it can. I mean,
they try to compensate. They do try to compensate for that by getting, homeschooling groups together to do trips and do stuff like that. So they do try to compensate. I'm hesitant to condemn them all. I know that there are people that are being homeschooled because parents don't want them to learn about evolution and risk that, and don't want them to question their faith.
I think you're mispronouncing that. I think the word you're looking for is evolution.
Yes, evolution. Yes. But I don't think that I don't even know if that's the majority, but it's certainly the ones that we hear about.
Mm.
So I don't know. I think that it would be much more interesting to take a closer look at homeschooling in general. Because I don't have enough information to condemn it all.
I sure do like condemning things, though.
It's great to get on a high horse. But the problem with the high horse is that sometimes you fall off.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the problem with the high horse is that eventually you fall off. All right. Is there anything else?
I do have something to add to the whole creationist thing.
Oh, please
Just
do.
last month, I went to the Creationist Museum of Santee, California.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which it was known before as the trashy version of the Creation Museum, where the upscale one was in Kentucky. And I went there and I was shocked about how much money they had pumped into this thing, because I'd seen pictures of it before. It looked nothing like what I'd seen before. It's all brand new, and I was able to record my entire tour of the entire thing. And in one of the very first entry rooms, we caught one of the guys painting one of the installations, and I was sure to bring up that he was painting velociraptors frolicking right next to Adam and Eve, which I just found stunning that he could talk about that just with a straight face. There were school children being led through this Creation Museum on a tour, and that's what interrupted my talk with the painter that was painting that installation. But there was also there were so many things that were wrong about the quote unquote science.
So, Michael,
yes,
the velociraptors in the Garden of Eden were not carnivores?
That's what I was questioning. I'm like, why are they playing like dogs right next to human beings?
Right, because nothing was a carnivore till after the fall.
Okay.
Yeah, even though they were designed with very sharp claws and teeth and no teeth to chew plants with. But that wasn't the worst parts. I mean, the worst parts were seeing a list of the evil false religions that included liberal Christian sects, Taoism, and Buddhism. But then towards the end of the list it said atheism, liberalism, and communism. And listed them as religions. And I brought my friend Jacob, who's Catholic, with me. And he was doing the facepalm maneuver. And I had people comment on my video that they thought he was going to facepalm his head off, because he was slapping himself that hard. Just about every room he would go ballistic. And finally, towards the middle of the museum, my Catholic friend was swearing. Every other word he said started with F, ended with K. It was not fire truck. And it was amazing that, I and my other atheist friend could, laugh at all of this, but he was like, this is just a blasphemy. This is not what Christians believe, and he was really angry. The part that really just stopped me in my tracks was they were building a new health wing, like all biology and stuff, and there was a lot of good science in there, like anatomy and bone structure and blood work and all this. And I was like, wow, I don't really have a problem with this part. And then I got to the genetics part, where they had a Punnett square with only 4 squares in it. Okay, we all know what this is from high school biology, the Punnett square, right? They were trying to say that Adam and Eve had enough genetic variability within them that one of their offspring was pure white and one of their offspring was pure black, and the other 2 were brown because they were, it was a very simple Punnett square. So basically they're saying that those 2 people had the genetic variability to create all the different colors that we see on the planet. Okay. And that one, I just had to call everyone to me and say, look at this. This is hilarious. But then towards the end of the museum, we kind of saw where the money was coming from, because they actually had an installation playing Ray Comfort's 180 video about abortion.
Yep.
And then it would exit into the gift shop, where you could see all of Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron's videos in there. So we know where the money is coming from, but it's completely revamped from what people have seen in years past.
That's amazing. Yeah, we'll link to that video in the show notes as well. So I haven't watched it yet. I'm interested now.
One of the things about the textbooks in Texas that I draw a correlation between inserting creationism and removing Jefferson from the textbooks, because they don't like Jefferson, because people will say that he's a deist, or he was a deist, and he wasn't Christian, and
he was a dry cleaner.
The whole argument about we're endowed by our Creator will come up if they talk about Jefferson. So while they're going into the biology textbooks and putting in the creationism, they're going into the history textbooks and removing Jefferson. And I'm not the biggest fan of Jefferson in the world. I haven't studied him too much, but I think that he's very important to the history of our country.
Right. No, we've covered that before about them trying to take Jefferson out, just basically remove him.
Same felt swoop that they're doing these things with.
Well, and that's coming out of Texas too. I mean, that it was Texas that tried to eliminate them from the textbooks. It was and it's Texas who also wanted to eliminate the Texas GOP that eliminated critical thinking from their platform.
Yep, right.
Brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Just pretend that all those things that you don't like don't exist.
And then when they can, let's try to trick parents into thinking that their children are going to a real museum and railroad their children through the Creation Museum.
Yeah, but that's pretty common.
And in fact, on February 26th or 27th, when Dawkins and Catherine Stewart are talking, Eric Cernyar will be opening for them, and he'll be on the panel, and he works against the Good News Club, which is teaching children to go proselytize to other children in schools, and they're trying to use bullying legislation to keep them from doing that.
That's an interesting issue, because parents aren't allowed to talk about it, but kids are allowed to talk about their own faith. And so if they are proselytizing, there's not much you can do, is there?
What they're trying to do is they're leaning heavily on bullying legislation, because you can't tell children that there's something wrong with them. That they're bad. That would be a bad thing. And so they're trying to use bullying legislation to keep it from happening. But they've chosen Denver for 2013 as one of their target cities. So
how you stop them? You spank them.
It is very hard, because it's children on the playground,
Well, but it has to cross a certain level to be bullying. I mean, I can see where that would be bullying, but, for one kid, telling another, well, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. Is that bullying?
If it's bullying, then what is the implication for parents that teach it to their children? Is that abuse?
Well, is it? Well, I mean, there are people who claim that is abuse. There is a lot of that going on.
I'd entertain both arguments.
Well, that's a tough one to make, because is it child abuse to tell your kids that if they do not behave a certain way, that God is going to send them to hell, and use that as fear? You know, it's interesting because we talk about spanking, which is oftentimes a punishment of fear. If you do that, you're going to get spanked. If you do that, you're going to go to hell.
And if you were to tell your child that if they do not clean up their act, that you're going to douse them in gasoline and set them on fire, that would be, those sorts of threats, even if you didn't carry them out, would be child abuse. But if you told them that God was going to burn them for all eternity in hell, then it's all of a sudden not child abuse. It's
a good religious upbringing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's it. You know, I don't know. I have a reaction to that, you know, that I see the logic in it, that teaching that is child abuse, but it's just so ingrained that that's just what people do, that even I overlook it, you know, and would pass it over and not see it as child abuse. But when you paint it in those terms, I don't know how you can get around it.
Well, it used to be that spanking was seen as just the way things worked.
Well, they take that Bible quote, you know,
Being
spare the
with
rod.
a belt was the way things worked just
Right.
50 years ago.
Spare the rod and spoil the child.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine how the court case is going to go if you take a parent to court for abusing their kids because they told them that that God was going to burn them in hell forever if they didn't clean up their room.
Jury selection would be interesting to say the least.
Wouldn't it?
Well, also there's the parallel just with one kid to another. If one kid were to tell another, "I'm going to douse you with gasoline and set you on fire," you know,
that's
because
bullying.
you're not it's the way that I think are good, then you know that's bullying. But if that kid says God's going to burn you for eternity if you don't change your ways, that's not bullying.
Both are a threat.
Both are threats, yes.
One is
Direct action.
yeah, direct action, and one is indirect action.
Well, one is saying, I have no control over it, I just know this is going to happen to you.
Well, then you're basically putting God on trial, because how indirect is that action, and how indirect do the children believe the action is?
Right.
You know, that's, on a certain level, that's no different than, you know, extorting protection money out of a shop owner by saying, you know, you've got a very flammable looking shop here. A lot of burning things. A lot of things that'd burn. You know, you should pay us insurance money to make sure that, you know, nothing catches fire in your shop.
Well, is it that, I mean, well, now we're devolving, but that's Pascal's wager. I mean, basically, Pascal's wager is fire insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's also a certain twist to it where you can say that the churches that are more likely to employ these methods are churches that are also more likely to use prosperity gospel, where they believe that if you are in line with God right now, that you will prosper monetarily right now. And so if you have a child who doesn't have the latest Nike tennis shoes, he might be teased as being ungodlike.
Yeah, it's more than just that. I mean, it's what Peter Popoff is doing now. His debt reduction plan. Send me all your money. You know, get right with God. God wants you to send me $8,000.
Okay, that was weird.
What was weird?
The computer gave out. I think Hayden didn't have his properly. I think it was running off battery power this whole time, so the computer just died. Looked like it was plugged in, but
yeah.
Well, we got anything more to talk about tonight, or
I don't know. This could devolve even further. I think that I actually find that discussion very interesting. One, the idea of using bullying legislation I'd like to cover that more thoroughly. If you've got more links and articles about that, Michael, I'd like to see it, because I think that
the actual location hasn't been set yet, but
okay.
At the end of February, either the 26th or 27th, Catherine Stewart and Eric Cernyar were going to speak, and then Richard Dawkins wanted in on the panel, so he'll be there as well. So there'll be a lot of talking about that in the lead up to that panel. And also, there will be meetings, especially with the Secular Student Alliance. As far as mentoring children to have secular student alliance in high school, maybe,
Hasn't Dawkins...
to help this kind of stuff out, because we've got a lot of college-based clubs, but we don't have any that are in high school in our area,
Right. Didn't Dawkins come out and say, though, that he thought teaching children theology was child abuse? Wasn't he one of the ones that said that?
I believe Hitchens said it.
Did he?
I don't know if Dawkins did or not.
Was it Hitchens?
Dawkins is more famous just for his quote about that there are no Christian children, there are no, Buddhist or Muslim or anything
children,
like that.
yeah.
Kids are born without religion.
Right, you have to be indoctrinated.
Yeah, but I don't know if he actually came out and said abuse or not. It wouldn't be surprising if he did. It certainly would be in step with the rest of his stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, though, that that's a hard sell.
What's that?
It's a real hard sell to say that if you teach your children religion, that it's child abuse. I think that's a very hard sell, and I think that that's likely to get more backlash than it is to get forward motion.
Yeah.
In chapter 16 of Hitchens' book, God is Not Great, is religion child abuse?
Okay.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I agree that that's a hard pill to swallow. Does he say that in the God Delusion? He might say that in the God Delusion. I do think that the whole doctrine of the eternal hell is pretty immoral.
Yeah. But sure has been proven to be a very strong thing, and that's what you can raise your kids on to get them to behave. They believe the ends justify the means.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm thinking Dawkins might have said that in the God Delusion, but I can't find it.
Actually, Dawkins said it in the Root of All Evil series.
There you go.
And he actually said religion equals child abuse.
Yep, the root of all evil, yeah.
Yes. And you can find that online.
Well, and it's interesting because, even, the Calvinists say that you cannot go to heaven through works alone, that it's accepting God as your salvation. That means you get to go to heaven. So you can do you can be the best person you can be, but you're still going to hell if you don't accept Jesus as your salvation.
Weren't the Calvinists the people who also said, though, that there were some people who were going to heaven no matter what? And they couldn't define exactly what what was special about these people except that they just were?
I don't know if that's Calvinism or not.
I seem to recall that as being associated with Calvinism.
It could
be incorrect.
Okay. Well, and, that's an interesting one because it's evolved since Calvin anyway, and become something different than actually what Calvin actually started.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Well, I mean, it ends up, it started off as Calvinism. Now it's just pictures of him peeing on things on the backs of people's cars.
That is my favorite form of Calvinism, actually.
Am I thinking of a different Calvin?
You're thinking of a different Calvin, but I do approve of that Calvinism. I don't think that's child abuse. Well, the stickers, anyway. If you're actually peeing on your kids, I think it is.
All right, good night, folks.
Boom.
Night, everybody.
All right. Anything else?
No.
All right, let's end this tragedy.
I think when you can end on peeing on children, I think you won.
Yay! I win.
Life.
Good night, everybody. All right, say good night, everybody.
I think we found our title, too.
Thank you for listening to the Amateur Skeptics Podcast. For more information about the Amateur Skeptics, go to amateurskeptics.com. To send us feedback, suggestions, or big flaming insults, feel free to contact us at WTF@amateurskeptics.com. Other contact information can be found on our website.
You can leave a voicemail for the Amateur Skeptics Podcast at 720-295-7785. Music for this podcast was provided by OFM. To find out more about OFM, go to myspace.com/OFMHQ. This podcast is released under a Creative Commons, No Derivatives 3.5 license. Thank you for listening to the Amateur Skeptics Podcast.
Amateur Skeptics website, Facebook, and podcast album art is provided by and copyright Shadow Knight Digital Portraiture. Larger prints or custom pieces are available upon request.